throws, swings.
There it is! There it is! Get out! Get out! All right!
Hit number 4192.
Swung out and missed. And Tom Browning has pitched a perfect game.
And a high fly ball, center field. He hit it a ton. It's gone. And the 2010 Central Division Championship belongs to the Cincinnati Reds. And Homer Bailey has pitched a no-hitter.
You're listening to the Redlegs Radio Report with Jason and Todd on Bowling Green's home of the Reds, ESPN Radio.
Welcome, Reds fans. It is the Redlegs Radio Report. My name is Jason Harbison, as our good buddy Josie said. And, of course, my good buddy Todd. If you read anything on Twitter today, he is on a vacation with his family, a well-deserved vacation. If you know anything about Todd's life, he definitely has been working through this pandemic, and he deserves some time off. So why not let him have a little family vacation? But sitting in with us, one of our favorite guys to come on and really brings a lot of intellectual stuff to the show, the professor himself, Dru Ross. Dru, what's up, buddy?
Hey, good morning. I hope I can fill in a little bit for Todd. So
well,
I know he'll be missed.
the bell curve on that, Dru, is I don't want to say anything bad about Todd, but the bell curve on that, I don't know. Who knows? It could be a little odd. I don't know. But I'm liking your shirt you got on today. I know we're on a visual medium here, but you've got a big Red Machine shirt on. It's got Johnny Bench looking up. That's pretty awesome. So you came dressed for the show today.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to remember the Big Red Machine. That's
Yeah.
not the only memories we have right now.
Right. Yeah, the way this season's kind of going. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. Great to have you on with us, Dru. Thanks so much for coming on. And don't forget our Twitter page at Redlegs Radio Rep and our Facebook page, Redlegs Radio Report. You can listen online, ESPN Radio 1027.com, and you can also get all of our past shows in podcast form on there, as well as subscribing to our podcast via iTunes. So you can check out a lot of our last shows. Last week we had on Tommy Thrall. The week before we had on Nate Jones. And the week before that we had on the Cowboy. This week is no different with the great lineup of guests. We have former Reds pitcher and current broadcaster Chris Welsh coming on the show at Think Pitch himself. Will be on with us a little bit later. Can't wait for that. A lot to unpack, a lot to talk about with this season. First off, I'm going to kind of make it a little personal here. So, Dru, this past week, I was one of the few people, and hopefully this is a growing list of people and not just a small kind of fraternity, if you will. I was one of the few people that actually got to cover a game and go to a live game at Great American Ballpark this last Tuesday. I was up visiting my mother in Ohio and snuck away for a couple hours and got to go to Great American Ballpark. But as you and I were talking off air, it was one of the, I don't want to say, it was just like a really eerie feeling. You know, I mean, just imagine everything that goes on at a ballpark. You take away half of that, which is the fans. And I know you said to me in a text, too, that you're like, I need to get back there. It'd be so great to go, but you can't, you know?
How was, the bars, and the restaurants, like the Holy Grail? How was that?
Holy Grail was there was a smattering of people because here's what's crazy too is I ended up being able to park. You know that if you turn kind of in by the Holy Grail, there's the underground garage. I actually parked like right underneath the Johnny Bench statue, which you'd never do on a normal game day. And granted, when you're covering a game for the press, you're there early before a lot of fans. There's still fans kind of milling around. They're in the Crosley Terrace. They're in the gift shop or something like that. But there was none of that. I saw I actually went in the gift shop, saw like two people in there, and two people were working. So there were maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us total in there. And being able to park just right under the Johnny Bench statue and just walk up those stairs, and then they had like a special media entrance, which is normally down in the tunnel kind of off of Merring Way. They're kind of underneath the stadium, but we actually got to go in down the third base line there, kind of by the big Red Machine room. So just really eerie, odd. I mean, again, I've been there before late when there's nobody there or not many people, but there's still people milling around that area, like you said, Dru, especially there on the banks. It was just kind of odd.
How many people were up there with you?
So there were about 10 people in the press box. So I mean, you think about like the regular writers like Bobby Nightingale, C. Trent Rosecrans, Mark Sheldon was in there, Jim Fay from the Cincinnati Enquirer, And then there were a couple of Japanese guys there that were covering a course for Akiyama, and they were kind of in the top row, if you will. They're like three kind of tiers, if you will, in this new press box, which is down the third base line now. If you're familiar with Great American Ballpark, it used to be kind of right there, a couple, I guess, stalls or whatever you want to call it, down from Marty and where Joe Z does the announcing. They've now turned that into like a bourbon kind of, I don't know what it is, but it's pretty cool looking. I didn't go into it, but I could see up into it from where our seats were in the press box. And it's like this upscale kind of bourbon-y thing. They've got what looks like these kind of bourbon barrels as tables. It's really cool looking. So you take the grounds crew, of course, which now the grounds crew and camera people and Jim Day are the only ones that are allowed in the 100 level. So there's not even anybody allowed in that kind of section, if you will. The press are only in the 200 level since they actually moved it down to the 200 level, which is a little farther away than where it used to be, which is, I'll get into it a little bit later, but it's kind of a far trek for people needing to get up to the press cafeteria, which was closed, by the way. They had a box lunch for us, which was great. Don't get me wrong. But again, just that overall eerie feeling, and I'm blessed I'm not complaining. Don't get me wrong. I was blessed to be one of the people that got approved credentials, and that's a big reason why I went on a Tuesday night, because I'm like, I know with limited space and having to space everybody out, had to wear a mask the entire time, Drew, that the odds of me getting approved, especially with all those like guys coming in from Japan and all over, plus the regular Cincinnati media, maybe the Dayton media, the odds of me going like on opening day that Friday up there, or even last Saturday's game, I mean, that was probably, actually I know some guys we've had on the show before, Joel Rattingham, who's from our sister station out of Richmond, Indiana. You've met him at a couple of our meetings up there. He was saying that he applied, I think, last Sunday, and he'd be in the same tier that I would be in because we're radio guys. He wasn't. They said that his credentials weren't, not that they weren't good, but they just didn't have room for him. So he was texting me that, and I fully expected, well, that's probably what's going to happen. I'll just try. But sure enough, and God bless him, Larry Herms met me right there at the gate. He's one of the directors, of course. He answers to Rob Butcher, who we've talked to many times, and he's Jamie Ramsey's partner in crime. Picked me up right there at the gate, got my ID, had to answer a couple questions, about have I been near anybody with COVID, blah, blah, blah. Had to wear the mask the entire time. But again, just an eerie feeling. But it was great to watch baseball.
Well, that'll be lasting memories for you. I mean, as far
Yeah.
as, one of the 30 people that was there, and you'll be only one of the few of us that will probably see a live game this year.
True, and I hope that we're wrong with that. But the way things are going here, they're saying that possibly Monday they could shut the whole season down. So, I don't know about that. I will say one last thing about just kind of adding to the eerie feeling, if you will. So, of course, they're pumping in all of the crowd noise from the video game MLB The Show, and it sounds fine on TV. But when you're there in the stadium, it sounds almost like one of those noisemakers that help people kind of get to sleep, that just kind of are background noise. And it sounded kind of like waves crashing on the beach, or I compared it to like if someone at your house is vacuuming maybe 2 rooms over, and you've got just kind of that little kind of noise. That's kind of what it was. But you hear different sounds throughout the stadium. The sound that's normally covered up by crowd cheer, just the low rumble of that, such as balls hitting the plastic seats when it goes foul. That thud, you never really hear that. The thud of all of those tarps that are in the outfield, whether it be the moon or sun deck out there in right field, and then in left field, they've got all those, like, I guess tarps, if you will, over them that say Charmin or Kroger or whatever. When home runs go out, and they were playing the Cubs, there were a lot of home runs going out that night on Tuesday. You hear that it's just like a different kind of thud. And it's just, I don't know. It's just weird beyond. It's like some kind of futuristic, apocalyptic baseball game, if you will.
Did you hear a lot of chirping from the players? Did you hear, if they missed one at the plate, some bad language or anything like that?
Yeah, a couple things that I'm like, man, that probably slipped out over the air. But being on down the third base line in the new press box, of course, we were on the Cubs side. So the Cubs, and you probably heard this on TV, we were talking about this off air, Drew, that they were, chirping. They weren't chirping, but they were chattering, I guess is the better term for that. And they were like, yeah, come on, let's do this. That was like constant. It was almost like, it reminded me so much of the times that I get a PA for Western's girls or ladies softball, or maybe even a girls' high school softball game. I mean, they're chattering. It's not the hey, better swing. It's not that like kid chatter, but it's just like, yeah, come on, let's go, Bobby, let's do. It's that kind of thing. Now the Reds weren't doing that, and they did kind of get some flack on Twitter and social media about, oh, they're not even chattering. But I did hear Suarez. He was kind of yelling in Spanish, nothing bad, but it was just like words of encouragement. I don't know. It could have been. I don't speak Spanish, but it was just really weird. You heard the entire sound. Anything that was going on, you heard it anytime. That you could hear the outfielders, especially the left fielder, calling for balls. Akiyama was playing center at the time, and I think Aquino was playing left field, and you could hear him yelling for the ball if they were getting close. So that was really, really cool. So I did enjoy that. So
you mentioned another thing earlier about the Reds adding another, I guess, bourbon type bar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Say this: they do lead the league.
Yeah. Yes. Matter of fact, our guest today, Chris Welsh, I think he tweeted out a picture of like I guess they call it like the baseball's longest bar down the third base line there, where they've just got like this really long bar. And we've had Phil Castellini on the show many times, especially during a Reds Fest, and it's kind of a running joke, Drew, in the front office. It's a joke, but it's not really a joke. That anytime that there's a problem, and they don't mean a problem as in anytime that they can see an area of Great American Ballpark that needs maybe to make more revenue, they see a problem, they throw a bar at it. And that's Phil Castellini's kind of moniker with that. And we've even brought that up on the show. It's like, we don't mean any disrespect about this, Phil, but we've heard from many people, whether it's Karen Forgas or Jose Husen or anybody in the Reds front office, when you see a problem at Great American Ballpark, you throw a bar at it. And he's like, hey, I embrace that. I don't mind that we're doing that. But yeah, that whole bourbon bar that's there, it's the old press box, really, really cool area. If I ever am not covering a game and they ever let fans back in there, love to see a game in there. I don't know that you and I are in that right pay grade. I don't know that you and I could afford tickets in there, or we know the right people. Maybe the guy that runs Kroger's maybe could get some seats in there. Who knows? Who knows how that works? But anyway, just a kind of surreal experience for me last Tuesday. So we talked a little bit, Drew, about of course, the outbreak. The Marlins this past week suspended their season for a week, and last night the Cardinals postponed a game against the Brewers because they had 2 cases. And they also said that they are going to be, if you need to make up a game, they're going to go kind of what they do in the minor leagues and have a doubleheader with 7 innings. Now, there also came out last night, and Keith Oberman also retweeted this, that Rob Manfred informed the MLBPA, that's the MLB Players Association, and the chief, Tony Clark, that the league could halt the campaign of the season if problematic and recent developments aren't turned around as soon as Monday. So, I know you're not Dr. Fauci, Drew, but, I mean, do you think that the season is in question? I mean, and here's a bigger question, and I almost tweeted this out, but I didn't want it to get a bunch of snide comments and get into because we always keep a lot of political stuff. We, for the most part, keep political stuff off the air. But had that been the Yankees, or even the Cardinals had a bigger kind of outbreak, and just because it's I don't want to say the lowly Marlins, but do you think if it was one of those teams like maybe even Houston, LA Dodgers, would this be a bigger deal? Not that it's not a big deal, but do you think that it would have been shut down maybe even sooner?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Cubs, the Yankees, the Dodgers.
Yeah.
I think that, it may last through the weekend, but if the weekend, if they still are having cases show up,
yeah.
The season could come to a halt soon.
Yeah, I mean, sooner than we want to. And Manfred has the ability. That was one of the things they signed into that clause when they started the season. He has the right at any time to shut the season down, basically on a moment's notice. So I hope that we're not seeing the last of baseball's games on Sunday because, I mean, the Reds, for all intents and purposes, everything I saw then, now granted I was only on the 200 level, but everything I saw there was on the up and up. I mean, they even had like sniffing dogs around the area. I don't know if they were sniffing for COVID or what they were, but the security was definitely heightened. Again, having to answer all those questions, just the social distancing, of course, having to wear masks. And one thing I didn't mention, too, was that the postgame, of course, the coolest part about postgame is getting to go down in the clubhouse. Well, they've taken that away, and it's now all done on a Zoom meeting. They gave me a link. I watched it. We all sat up there in the press box, and it was funny/not funny because C. Trent and Bobby and a bunch of those guys they had their masks on, but when they were asking a question, because they're kind of talking like this and they're got a mask on, so they took their mask off. You'd see it on camera. They just like lifted above their mouth, and you'd see their mouth moving on the screen. They'd ask a question to maybe the starting pitcher, and then they would put their mask back on. So again, kudos to the Reds because they've gone above and beyond what they need to do. Even as far as separating out some of the players up in the stands, they put those big kind of canopies there so guys can get out of the dugout maybe if they're not playing that day. I know a lot of the starting pitchers that aren't pitching that day are sitting up there on both teams, kind of in those Diamond Club seats there.
You mentioned, Manfred mentioned the approval of 7-inning double hitters.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens, if you have a game that you have to make up,
mm-hmm.
well, that might benefit the Reds because keep your starters in there for 7.
Yes.
And you do not have to go to that awful bull.
Right. And we'll talk more about that in a minute because we got to take a break here. And we are going to have Reds broadcaster and former pitcher Chris Welsh right here on ESPN Radio and also ESPNRadio1027.com.
And McCarty's coming in from the bullpen with no warm-up. I cannot believe this. We've never seen a pitcher come to the mound without warming up. Let's see what happens. Whoa, that's a long one. Oh, and another. Whoa, that's 7 home runs this inning. If he would have only warmed up. In baseball, pitchers don't take the mound without warming up, so why would you take chances with your air conditioner when you need to cool down? Don't wait until it gets hot. Turn to the experts. Clean and service your unit today with Bowling Green Refrigeration, your authorized Carrier dealer. Bowling Green Refrigeration can service your Carrier unit and all other major units. Set up an appointment today, 270-782-5391. With a clean Carrier unit, there'll be no surprises this summer. Bowling Green Refrigeration, your comfort is their concern.
Gary Force Paint and Body Shop stands with Southern Kentucky in this pandemic because they know if you've ever driven in Bowling Green, you can survive anything. A natural name change? I just don't see a one there. It's just I-6, an entire Fountain Square renovation. Oh, there's a spot. Park over there. And, of course, the roundabout.
Hey, I think I finally got this whole roundabout thing down.
We made it through that, and we'll make it through this. Together. Gary Force Paint and Body Shop, Bowling Green's iCar Gold Certified body shop that works with all major insurance, behind the post office on Vanderbilt Drive.
It just doesn't feel like summer without an ice-cold Coca-Cola in your hand. Stop by your local convenience store today and grab a 20-ounce bottle of Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. Or pick up even more delicious refreshment with a 20-ounce bottle of Diet Coke, Sprite, or Fanta. So no matter how you soak in that summer sun, at home or on the go, grab an ice-cold Coca-Cola today and enjoy.
What's a giant fish doing in my backyard?
I brought a few treats for your pool, like pesticides, antifreeze, and some yummy motor oil. Because you dumped this stuff down the storm drain, I had to swim in it. Now it's your turn.
It's time we all did our part to stop polluting Kentucky's waterways. To find out how you can help, visit stormwater.ky.gov. Brought to you by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet.
Baby, if you've ever wondered whatever became of...
Welcome back to the Redlegs Radio Report. Jason Harbison, Dru Ross sitting in with us. Yeah, Drew, got a little WKRP coming at you. Yeah. Now, that's not the station channel here, ladies and gentlemen. That's, of course, WWKU, ESPN 1027, but hope the bosses don't get too mad. I'm wearing my WKRP shirt today, so I figured that I might as well kind of get that out there. I don't know. I'm a little sentimental about that, WKRP. One of the greatest shows, by the way.
I like that shirt. You got Riverfront Stadium there in the background.
We're talking a lot about shirts today on a visual medium such as radio, which is really just kind of odd all things around. So, our guest today has been on the show many, many times, and he's scolded us before about giving very long intros like I like to do, so let's just get right to it. Please welcome Chris Welsh. Chris, what's up, buddy?
I'm doing well, Jason. Drew, how are you guys doing this morning?
We're doing wonderful, talking Reds with you. Can't wait to talk some more Reds because, the season's maybe not what we expected so far, but I think the Reds hopefully can turn things around.
Well, I don't know. the Reds were 1-8 last year to start the season,
True.
right?
True.
So they have gotten off to some bad starts historically, and then it ended up playing some better baseball. I'm hoping that's the case here this year because they just don't seem to be completely what we expected, I think, when we look at this team on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. So really kind of to get right down to this here, Chris, I guess my first question to you is, how last night was kind of a historical night for you. How odd was it calling a game from not the stadium, but calling an away game there from the studio? Was it just kind of an odd or surreal experience for you?
Yeah, it was odd, but it wasn't really that bad, to be honest with you, because I call the game on TV anyway a lot from the monitor because I want to know what people are seeing at home. I don't want to be talking about something that I can see from the TV booth that you cannot see from your living room couch. So I've got one eye on the monitor all the time. The only difference really for me is that there's only one TV feed, and what that means for people is that there's a handful of people at the ball game with cameras. We usually have 8 or 9 cameras at every game. There aren't that many anymore. There may be only 5 or 6. And because there are 8 or 9 cameras at a normal home game, I can ask the producer or the director, hey, can you get a shot of the dugout? Or can you get a shot of the third baseman who's hugging the line right here? I can't do that when we're on the road because we're basically getting the feed how it's cut by the home team. So we've been told as the home team, don't give us anything particular to the Reds because the Cubs announcers or the Tigers announcers are going to know why are you showing, Joey Votto in the middle of an inning talking to an umpire. So basically what you're looking at is old-fashioned TV, cut generically, and I have to always keep that in mind when we're calling a game.
Gotcha. So now really along those lines, you kind of touched on this too, Chris. What do you make, of course, when you are in the park, the fanless ballparks, the restrictions, really no player interactions with the press or the broadcasters, can't go down in the clubhouse, do any of the pre or post game stuff. And really, I guess that kind of leads into as well as the chance of the season could be shut down as well. Just your overall thoughts on all of that.
Well, for me, it affects me and the homework that I'm able to do because, you can get a lot of stuff on the Internet nowadays. Some you can trust, some you can't. So I go down and I verify things that I may have read about somebody. I like to talk to the players. I like to talk to the coaches and managers. I get in the other clubhouse almost every day, talk to those guys. I'm in the umpire room. So I'm getting things that you can't read anywhere, and I'm verifying it so that when I go on the air with it, I know it's true. And I miss that stuff. Now, we do have access to all the interviews that are out there, the Zoom call interviews, that are made available to the press that follows the Reds around or the other team around. But, I can't pull somebody off to the side in a Zoom interview and say, hey, what do you really think about that play that happened last night? Or why did you really bring in that pitcher when, it didn't look like a good matchup? I've developed relationships with coaches and players along the years, and I can do that stuff because they know that I'm not going to burn them, but I need to know the backstory, and I don't get that now. So there is a missing link as far as information for me that is very hard to fill.
Well, and you're right, too. I was lucky enough to be up there this past week covering game, and there's a big disconnect, and I totally understand it, why they're doing that over the Zoom meeting. And it's kind of interesting because you see everybody's kind of little like thumbnail picture of them. You see Jim Day, he's asking his questions, and then see Trent. And I don't want to say that it's not great, but I think it's wonderful what Rob Butcher is able to do with the press and the media. But you're right, there sometimes is a big disconnect there.
Yeah, and there's no way to fill it. And I'm wondering if we're going to see more and more of this going forward because maybe the days of a bunch of media hanging around the locker room, which I don't do, by the way. I don't think there's too many, any of the TV guys. I know I never see Brantley down there hanging around. I think the locker room is meant for the players and not for the press to be hanging around. And although, the newspaper guys have to get their stories, and the radio guys are down there trying to get interviews and so on. And Jim Day is as well, but just not for me. But I do like to saddle up next to a guy during batting practice or a coach while he's hitting infield fungos, and ask him what the real deal is. And you don't get that. So it may be just the way things are going to be going forward. It is baseball, though, and that's, for me, way better than no baseball at all. There was a time this summer, Jason and Drew, that I thought we weren't going to play at all, that there was not going to be one pitch made this year. It looked very bleak from a number of reasons why, whether it was the pandemic or whether it was the détente between owners and players, where they were both shooting each other on a daily basis. But I'm happy that they're out there at least playing baseball.
Hey, Chris, this is Drew. I'd first like to wish Jason a happy birthday.
Oh, gee, thanks.
During the break,
today?
Yeah, during the break,
Jeez.
I was on Facebook and seen it his birthday.
No, it's not really. This is Chris's day. It's not my day. We're having Chris on.
We wish you a happy birthday, Jason.
This is your birthday, and you didn't even tell me ahead of time?
No, I didn't. I did not. Funny thing is Todd tweeted out something. He's not even here today. The guy never even tweets anything, but he decides for the first time in 3 years on our shared account for Redlegs Radio Report to put something up there. So I half blame him.
I want to be just one of the many who wishes you a very, very, very happy birthday. How old are you today, anyway, Jason?
I am 40 and 6. So yeah,
40 and 6.
46.
That math.
Yeah.
Hey, you look really young for 46. I got to tell you.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And speaking of, by the way. I know, Drew, I'm stealing your thunder here because you were going to ask the next question. But I don't want this to sound any weirder than our relationship already is, Chris, but I'm loving your longer hair that you have now on TV, and it's just like that cool, slick. Now, is that like a COVID thing where you haven't been able to get a haircut, or is that just like your new awesome look?
That is kind of weird for you to say that. My wife has been asking me over the years to grow long hair. Mm-hmm. And she says, when you retire, what you got to do? You got to grow a ponytail and get an earring. And I'm like, okay, if you can find me a beach in Hawaii, I'll do that. So the COVID thing comes around, and of course, I've been really sequestered. I mean, not that I'm afraid because of my age. I'm 65. I don't think I'm going to die if I get it. I hope not anyway, but I don't want to get it, So I've been really good. I don't go anywhere except to the golf course and stay outside. I wear a mask and all that kind of stuff, right? So she says, well, don't get a haircut, why don't you just grow your hair? So I started growing it, and I'm like, God, it went through this phase. I got to tell you, there's like 3 weeks there where it looks like I'm like some old wino in the gutter somewhere. I mean, it's awful. And so now I'm growing a little bit longer, and I don't know whether it's going to stay or not, but it doesn't grow as fast as it used to. And when it does, it comes out gray and white, which isn't all that cool, really. You don't know that yet at 46, but you'll figure it out someday. So I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it, and you never know. If I show up next spring down in Arizona with a ponytail, you'll know that you heard it here first.
Awesome. You broke the news right here on the Redlegs Radio Report. I appreciate that.
I mean, I would be the only broadcaster with a ponytail, right? And I kind of, before I decide to do anything like that, I'm kind of wondering what the public would say. Would they embrace this, or would they say, oh, man, what is this guy, man? He's time to hit the road. Look at him. He's lost all of his marbles. So,
well, now, didn't you say a couple years ago that, was it your daughter either found this or she made this, but there was like a Chris Welsh mustache, like Twitter page or something like that? Like it had its own, I could see your hair having its own Twitter page maybe.
Yeah, I think there was a Facebook page or something that had, maybe it was Twitter, I don't know, but it was my mustache that was, living back in the days of the 90s, when I was teamed up with George Grant. I don't know if the ponytail thing's going to make it or not, but hey, you walk up and down the beaches sometimes, when you get on a vacation, you see these guys who look awfully content, sitting under a thatched roof little gazebo out on the beach, and you're thinking, man, that'd be pretty cool. So I don't know how it's going to play out, whether baseball broadcasters ought to have ponytails or not, but we'll figure it out. I did hear this, though, from Tommy Thrall. If you ever talk to him, you can ask him.
Mm-hmm. He was on last week with us, by the way.
He sees my longer hair, and he says, well, I hate more than anything in the whole world, don't you? And I said, no, Tommy, what is that? He says, a man bun. And I'm thinking, well, if for no other reason, I should grow my hair long and have a man bun.
Just so he has to look across the booth at you there and just kind of
right.
Cringe, if you will. Drew, sorry, I've been taking your thunder. You actually have like real questions for Chris.
Well, I've got a good one.
Go ahead.
Chris, the starting pitch has been very solid. What do you think the issues might be with the bullpen?
Well, I think what's happened is that the shortened summer camp, if you want to call it that, has hurt a little bit. And that and the fact that, when you're going forward, this is the weakness in the ball club anyway. we knew the problems that Raisel Iglesias had last year. You also knew that you hoped that everybody else is going to take a next step, that Michael Lorenzo may take a next step, and that you find a good bridge to Raisel Iglesias through maybe Amir Garrett from the left side and other things. But, hey, at this point, David Bell's just trying to find people he can trust, and that's the most important thing about a bullpen. You have to know what a pitcher can do in certain circumstances, and I think that has backfired. I mean, Iglesias has come in, not looked good. Lorenzen was the main man last year. He's come in 2 times, not looked good. Amir Garrett has looked outstanding. So I think in a short season like this, David Bell's going to have to improvise. He's going to have a meeting with these relievers and say, you know what, all of our preseason plans of you being in this inning and you being in this matchup and so on, those are out the window. Well, I call on you, you be ready to pitch. And that's easier said than done, but I think that's the only way he's got to go forward.
We're talking with Chris Welsh here today on the Redlegs Radio Report, if you didn't recognize his voice already. Now, Chris, before the season started, kind of along the same lines of what Drew was asking you there, a lot of the national media, not just like the local guys like us or maybe somebody up there in the Cincinnati area on WLW, were picking the Reds to win the Central, especially due to the big moves that they made in the offseason. Now, with I guess their slow start, it's safe to say 2-5, even on a 60-game season, would be somewhat considered a slow start. Like you were saying, last year they started 1-8. With each game counting for so much, do you feel the Reds are just underachieving, or they just maybe haven't gelled yet with some of these new pieces in there?
Well, I think a 2-5 start. Baseball is baseball. I mean, they lost a couple of one-run games. They got good pitching in some other games, and they didn't take advantage of it. So I think it's just unlucky right now. I think they're a really good team, and I still think that they're the best team in the division. I don't think the Cubs have a bullpen worth a darn. I don't think the Brewers are going to be that good. I don't think the Cardinals in the long run are going to be that good. So I think that the Reds have a chance to be really good. I think they're a trendy pick for a reason because they are a really good team. But they just have to get back to playing baseball, and I think that's it. They get a couple of good starting performances. Here's what I really like about the Reds. You lose a game with Castillo last year or the year before, and you're thinking, oh, man, this team might roll off three losses in a row when you start looking at the rotation behind him. But now you got, Sonny Gray in there as a stopper. You have Bauer in there as a stopper. DeSclafani, for me, was one of the really good stories of 2019. He's come back, and he's really polished up his game. So I think the Reds have 4 legitimate, really top, I can't say aces, but high-end rotation pitchers that are going to stop long losing streaks. Now you got to get the offense going a little bit.
Chris, it's Drew again. Did you keep anything?
Hi again.
Hey, did you keep anything from your jerseys, balls, or anything from your playing days?
An ugly Padres jersey.
Yeah, you know what? That's the one jersey I don't have. I wish I had.
Oh.
The white, gold, and the brown jersey. I don't know what happened to that. I think it was sold out there somewhere, and I never have been able to get a handle on it. I do have a Reds jersey. I do have my Yankees jersey that I had in Big League Spring Training for a couple of years. I've got a bunch of baseballs and stuff. When I pitch a good game, I keep the baseballs. And if I pitch a bad game, balls are up in the upper deck somewhere. So it's I'm not a huge memorabilia collector. There are certain things that I collect because I like them a lot. For instance, I've got a friend of mine who's a huge card collector, and he said, "Okay, listen, because I did a couple favors for him. He goes, I'll get you any card you want. What do you want?" I said, "I'll tell you what I really want. I want 3 cards. I want a Ted Kluszewski card because I love Ted Kluszewski. I met him as a kid growing up, and it's still ingrained in my brain. I want a Sammy Ellis card, who was a right-handed pitcher for the Reds back in the 1960s. He won, I think, 20 games in 1968. He was my coach in the minor leagues for the Yankees, who basically got me to the big leagues by giving me some really good advice. And the other guy I wanted was Robin Roberts, who I pitched for in college. He also was very instrumental in giving me advice that got me to the big league. So those are the 3 that I like, but I don't really keep a lot of memorabilia. I don't have a man cave or anything like that. I have a few pictures up on the wall. I have a picture of me pitching in Crosley Field when I was in the 8th grade. That's the kind of stuff I like the most.
Very nice, very nice. Now, I think you had your daughter on air a couple years ago, and she was actually wearing one of your old hats, maybe on Father's Day. I'm getting older, as you know, today, and my memory's a little lost. It goes by the wayside, Chris. Is that true? So I know you do still have some of that memorabilia around.
Yeah, you know what? She did. She ended up, finding one of my old hats. A legit real hat. I mean, my real Cincinnati Reds hat that I wore when I pitched there, and it fit her, and she put it on, wore it to a ball game, and made a big deal out of it. By the way, she's a podcast. She's an epidemiologist, or maybe like a biological microbiologist. Okay, she's a PhD, but she specializes in contagious diseases. So this coronavirus thing is in her wheelhouse. And she has had for the last few years a podcast called "This Podcast Will Kill You," and they always go out and they talk about smallpox and rabies and things like that. Well, of course, now they're talking about COVID-19 a lot. So that same girl that was wearing my hat is actually somebody who uses words that I have no idea what they mean, and it's kind of fun. But I thought I'd give her a plug right here. This podcast will kill you. They're getting about 500,000 downloads a month, so they're hitting it pretty big.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that last time you were on the show. So obviously, it's gotten some real serious legs, and I would think, like you were saying, that right now, especially with all of the COVID stuff going on, it's probably getting even more hits.
It's interesting because she was down visiting me in spring training when they shut spring training down. Of course, it felt like a lead balloon on all the spring training sites. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, we weren't allowed to go there. They shut the whole place down. Nobody knew what the pandemic was all about. They were sending players home. Some players they were going to house down in Arizona until further notice. No one thought that it would be July by the time that they end up playing. And my daughter Erin was very, wired in. She said, "Hey, Dad, this is serious stuff. Don't leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to the grocery store instead of you. We'll go get gasoline instead of you." And she was very careful and cautious about, exposing herself or anybody else to this thing. And I think that everybody else should be the same way. That's why I'm real curious about what baseball is going to do moving forward with some of these teams that are having players test positive. The Reds had Matt Davidson test positive. The Marlins have had a dozen players and coaches test positive. Now the Cardinals, the threat of perhaps MLB being shut down by the commissioner that came out last night on a report by ESPN. I don't know where it's going, guys, but I hope it doesn't get shut down.
Yeah, really, same here, and I hope that we were talking before you came on the air, and I kind of touched on this a little bit, that I don't want to be in this weird fraternity where I may be one of the only people in the year 2020 that got to see a live baseball game when I covered this past week. I just hope that that's not the case.
I don't think it's going to be the case, really, unless it really just spreads. But, I mean, I think what the commissioner has said with his message to Tony Clark, who's the head of the Players Association, hey, corral your guys, okay? This is 2 months. If you can't stay in your hotel room, if you can't follow the MLB protocol, then you're going to shut the entire industry down. I mean, you're going to hurt so many people who rely on baseball for their, to put food on their table. And I'm not talking about the players. I'm talking about people who work in television, people who work in the media. I'm talking about people who, you've already heard, stadium employees and people that can't afford to lose these paychecks. And there's a lot more out there that you can hurt. And just going out and partying some night, in a strange town outweigh the risks of, shutting the industry down or infecting your teammate. So I think that the baseball players have to get their act together. I mean, they've got to figure out that they know what the protocol is, because there's other industries watching baseball right now. Schools are watching baseball. Other sports are watching baseball. How can they handle it? Can they really be able to have a season with these protocols in place? So that's why what baseball is doing now is this big experiment for the entire world. So let's get these players, to start complying and see if these protocols really work. If they don't, then we're in trouble. If they do work, then we realize how we can manage our life.
That is very spot on. I couldn't have said it any better myself there, Chris. So we're talking with Chris Welsh, of course, former Reds pitcher and current broadcaster, if you didn't recognize his voice. Now, Chris, one last question before we let you go. Again, thanks again for letting us call you today, because we know they moved the game time up to 12:10 Central, our time, as well as 1:10 Eastern. So kind of threw a curveball, all pun intended. So we know your time is very valuable today because you got to get over to the studio. But since this may be your last time anyway, because we're asking about on the show, because you're probably offended of us asking about your long hair, and then you went into the man bun thing and everything. So I'm just going to keep going on this crazy train here. You were born in Delaware, but you moved to Cincinnati. Is that correct? As a young child?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Now, we're talking a lot about your daughter and your family, so let's just keep it kind of family related here. You had 3 sisters. Is that correct? I think I read that. I believe everything I read on the internet. So this is obvious. You had 3 sisters growing up.
Those are things that you can believe. That's your sister part.
All right. So now, how was the bathroom space? I don't know what the size of your. How did you get in to start your school day or whatever with all those ladies around the house?
I didn't get into the bathroom. I can tell you. I mean, you have older sisters around. I mean, they take long showers and baths, and they like to primp themselves a little bit. And I had to figure out how to go down and use the half bathroom and splash some water on my face and go. And that was part of it. The other part of it, Jason, when you're raised in a household with 3 sisters and no brothers, they did all the dishes and the indoors tidying up and so on. I was responsible for everything outdoors. I had to cut the grass and trim. Back in those days, you didn't have weed whackers. You had those hand clippers, and I was responsible for washing the car, which I had to do every week because my dad was the coach and used to drag the field, with a drag behind his car. And we're not talking about grass infields. We're talking about, good old dirt infields where the dust storm would come up when he would drag the field. And then the car would be completely covered with dust, and I'd have to wash it every week. And but I love, I had a great childhood, a very fortunate childhood. Both my parents were in the household. They made sure I got a good education, and it was fun. But I've never been on a talk show where somebody's asked me about my sisters. They'll be delighted. Barbara, Paula, and Andrea will all be delighted that they got mentioned here today.
Now, are you the oldest? Or, well, I don't want to get too deep into your
middle.
You're the middle. Okay, yeah. Middle child. So, okay, so you are 2 older sisters and 1 younger, or just like how did?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct, yeah.
okay. So I didn't know if you were the baby of the family, or if we were to interview them, would they say, "Oh, Chris got away with everything. Oh, mom and dad didn't care," that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, they would call me the golden boy, because I was the only boy. So we didn't take a lot of vacations in the summertime because my dad coached the baseball team and I was playing baseball. They would always hate me for not being able to go on a vacation. The vacations that we did take were down at Kentucky Lake. That's about as far south as I had ever been before I went to college in the state of Florida. And so we would go down to Kentucky Lake and rent a cabin and do what people did back in those days, and which was a lot of fun. But they always hated me for playing baseball because they never got summer vacations.
Probably still to this day, that's probably still a fresh wound for them.
Yeah, I tell them to hang with it. Don't worry about it.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for calling. But before we let you go here, give us a big shout out and a plug for the Baseball Rules Academy that you talk about on air so much.
Well, thanks, guys. I've had this website called Baseball Rules Academy now for about 7 or 8 years. It's completely free, although there is a premium part of it if you want to get involved with quizzes and tests and lessons and courses and things like that. But you can read, I don't know, up to 5 or 6 articles a month, absolutely free. I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of content up there. You just type baseball rules into Google, it'll come up on the front page. And there's a lot of stuff. And if you're into the rules at all, it's a worthwhile read. If you're not into the rules, why? You need to know the rules. So, Jason, I encourage you to get on if you ever have a question. There was a question the other night about the rules. Bases loaded, the Reds had, it was a line drive hit to, I think it was Freddie Galvis, hit a line drive to Chris Bryant, who made a play, and it looked like the ball hit the ground. But the umpire behind him called it a fly ball catch in the infield. He stepped on, that would be one out. He stepped on third to double up a runner from third base. He threw to first, double up another runner, and that was a triple play. And I knew right away that it was a play that was not reviewable according to the rule book. And So we were able to move on from there. So I'm glad I did it. I started the website because I didn't know the rules like I thought I should as an announcer, and now I've enabled all the other announcers out there to get on and learn something about the rules, and I hope you do too. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Chris, for coming on. Anytime you want to come on the show, we are glad to talk to you for hours. I wish our show was longer because we could go on and on forever with you.
Well, Jason and Drew, really thanks a lot. I'm going to head on down to the ballpark, and I hope we get a Reds win this afternoon.
Absolutely. Chris Welsh, everybody. Thanks so much, Chris. Well, I mean, doesn't get much better than that, does it? I mean, I could talk to him for like I said, hours and hours, and just one of the he's been on our show every year for the past 9 years, sometimes 2 or 3 times, and of course he comes on here when the Caravan comes, which, crossing my fingers that even happens this year, as well as Reds Fest with COVID going on, Drew, so who knows. But we're going to take a break here on the Redlegs Radio Report. Stay tuned. We've got so much more Reds stuff, if you will, to talk about on ESPN Radio 102.7. And also, I forgot to mention earlier, Drew, Glasgow 104 The Score, listening in on this wonderful Saturday morning Redlegs Radio Report.
You know, it just doesn't sound like summer without a Coke. Now that's a good start. Maybe some sprinklers. Let's keep it cool. All right now, batter up. Ooh, how about a summer blockbuster? That's what I'm talking about. The sound of summer. Enjoy summer. Enjoy Coca-Cola.
And nothing makes summer taste sunnier than an ice-cold Coca-Cola paired with your favorite food and favorite people. So whether it's Taco Tuesday or you're grilling burgers, summer's not summer without Coca-Cola and your favorite foods enjoyed together. Coca-Cola, together tastes better.
Gary Force Paint and Body Shop stands with Southern Kentucky in this pandemic because they know if you've ever driven in Bowling Green, you can survive anything. A natural name change? I just don't see a one there. It's just I-6, an entire Fountain Square renovation. Oh, there's a spot. Park over there. And, of course, the roundabout.
Hey, I think I finally got this whole roundabout thing down.
We made it through that, and we'll make it through this. Together. Gary Force Paint and Body Shop. Bowling Green's iCar Gold Certified Body Shop that works with all major insurance. Behind the post office on Vanderbilt Drive.
Can you hear the hunt? You will with Tetra. Designed by hearing doctors and avid hunters, Tetra offers premium hearing enhancement and protection, programmed for your specific hearing loss. Pinpoint turkeys gobbling, the big bucks slipping behind you, or protect your ears in the duck blind. If you want your edge back, try Tetra risk-free for 30 days. Call now and mention SportsWeb and receive $100 off your order. 615-618-9904 or anytime at TetraHunt.com. Tetra isn't just hearing protection, it's hearing perfection.
So what's the deal with Big Green Egg Grills? Mike Keith here, letting you know if you're looking to grill, smoke, or bake on the highest quality grill out there, you need to see Bowling Green Fireplace and Grill. They have the Big Green Egg, #1 for over 25 years and with good reason. With a lifetime warranty and best-in-class ceramics, this thing is awesome. There are no chemicals in Big Green Egg Lump Charcoal. And Bowling Green Fireplace and Grill has the best price in town. Just off the bridge on Old Louisville Road. BowlingGreenFireplace.com.
Most people think water pollution is an industrial problem, but it's also a household problem. When you allow hazardous chemicals, paint, or even pet waste to wash down the storm drain, it goes directly into our water. That makes a huge mess today, and an even bigger mess for our kids to clean up tomorrow. It's time we all did our part to protect Kentucky's water. To find out how you can help, visit stormwater.ky.gov. Brought to you by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet.
This is This Date in Reds Baseball, brought to you by Cincinnati USA Regional Tourism Network.
On this date, August 1st, 1981, the Reds did something a little unusual for this time of year. They reported to training camp. Yes, in the middle of the season, the Reds were in training, not in Florida, but at the University of Michigan campus in Ann Arbor. 1981 was the year a strike interrupted the baseball season for 50 days. And when an agreement was finally reached on July 31st to resume the season, the teams were given a week to get ready. So the Reds trained in Ann Arbor, flew out to California to play an exhibition game, and resume play on August 10th in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. Training camp in the middle of the 1981 season on this first day of August. This date in Reds baseball.
This date in Reds baseball with team historian Greg Rhodes is brought to you by CincinnatiUSA.com, the official travel guide of Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. CincinnatiUSA.com.
Welcome back to the Redlegs Radio Report. Jason Harbison, Dru Ross, sitting in with us this wonderful Saturday. It's kind of rainy out a little bit. I can't really see out this window, but when you came in this morning, Drew, you were covered with like raindrops on your T-shirt there. So there is rain in the forecast. I know Chris Allen; he's a couple stations over here on Sam, but I know rain when I see it. I can tell you that much. I don't need Todd here to know that it's going to rain, with him being out. So, again, if you're just joining us, Chris Welsh was on with us a little earlier. The guy can talk forever. Love having him on. Just
he's a great guest. He really is.
Wind him up and let it go. He is very, I know I was talking about how you're intellectual and you bring like a different level to this show, but he's definitely one of those guys too. I guess it's maybe years of being, and he used to have, before the internet, he used to have this that's where his name on Twitter, Think Pitch, comes from. He used to actually, after he retired from baseball, from pitching, he had this thing called Think Pitch, which was like a newsletter that he would send out to all of these clubs and all of these people that would like subscribe to it. And again, like I said, years before the internet. So that's where the Think Pitch came from. So him having this Baseball Rules Academy is only just a kind of a natural progression for him, if you will, on all things intellectual when it comes to knowing the rules and everything else that goes along with that. All right, so we talked to him about, of course, the possible COVID shutdown. The Reds' slow start going 2-5, of course, last night. They lost to the lowly Tigers, as I like to say, 7-2. But, Drew, how much of that we're expected because, the Tigers lost 114 games last year, and they didn't really make any pickups in the offseason, and the Reds are loaded now with all the guys that they picked up. How much of that do you think maybe the Tigers are overplaying, or they're playing above their heads, or just the Reds, like I was asking Chris Welsh, haven't gelled yet?
Detroit's got good pitching in these 4 games for the most part.
Really have.
Real good pitching. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody thought the Reds, based on last year's record, Reds started the season with a nice schedule.
Yeah.
Should get out of the gates off and running, and that's not happened.
Yeah, and really, if you look at it, the Cubs, we were talking off air too, the Cubs bullpen is almost as bad, if not worse, than the Reds bullpen. And of course, I didn't expect the Reds bullpen to be this bad. I thought maybe Iglesias would have his moments and stuff, but Lorenzen, he's gone in some key moments and given up some big home runs. So I don't know if it's just a matter of them turning it around quicker. They've talked on air a couple times, and actually Chris Welsh has said on air that, even though that they could be stretched out and it's not a problem with the summer camp, that they kind of had to restart the season, or if you want to call it spring training 2.0, that they can stay stretched out in their backyard, their local gym, whatever, but it's getting up to game speed and being able to kind of sustain that, because it's not really the injuries don't usually happen at the beginning of the season, although it has been happening a lot to some other teams on pitching. You look at Verlander and some other guys, that it's the long haul. Well, the long haul isn't going to be there, so it's almost like encapsulated in a smaller 60-game season. So I think what's going to be interesting, as I often say, is to see how guys can do down this short stretch.
Well, you mentioned Lorenzen.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, he gave up a lot of key home runs. So far this year he has.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously people talk about, he's a freak of an athlete.
Right.
He can hit for a pitcher, he can run for a pitcher, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy's paid to get outs. He's not getting the job done.
Yeah.
He's not.
Mm-hmm. And the starting pitching, you heard Chris Welsh talk about it. I mean, outstanding. I mean, the first 3 games, even though they didn't win them all, were just amazing. If you look at that starting 3 that they've got there with Bauer, and even other than Wade Miley, who's now on the DL, and everyone kind of expected big things from him, he really kind of tanked on his one game. So with him being on the injured list, that now DeSclafani is coming back. So that's a good problem to have, as I've often said on the show, that they've got a lot of guys in their arsenal. And really, Malley, the game that I went to on Tuesday night, he kept him in the game. He left the game with 2 runs. It got out of hand once the bullpen came in, but I think you've got to be really, really proud. I can't think of really, even back in the 2010 and the 2012 2012 seasons when the Reds were really great and won the Central, I can't even think of them having a big 1-2-3 punch like that, even as not, I want to say far back as that, because that doesn't seem like that long ago, but really, I can't remember the Reds having a big 1-2-3 punch in the starting rotation like that.
Well, in 2012, they had Cueto, and they had Matt Latos, who had a solid year, and then you went maybe, I believe Bronson Arroyo was in there, and I agree with you. I mean, the guys they got, Castillo, Gray, and Bauer now, they're studs.
Yeah, they really are, and I mean, can't say enough about Gray. I mean, there were people arguing that Castillo should be the ace, the number one guy getting the opening day start. Now, I'm not saying last night was any indication of that, but the way his ball has got movement, I'm talking about Sonny Gray, of course, just amazing the way that he is painting those corners. And he doesn't get you out with like the overpowering fastball. Castillo is more the pitcher that does that. But Sonny Gray is the guy that's going to paint those corners, as I call it, like the Maddox kind of way of pitching. And the way he got fired up the other night, too, where that guy kind of leaned into the pitch, I can't think of his name for the Cubs the other night, getting fired up because the Reds had just been getting, what handed to him the last couple games. And he goes out there and he gets fired up. Even in the post-game conference there, Zoom conference, whatever you want to call it, he was just like, yeah, we needed to get out there. We needed to get this win, and it's going to be on my shoulders. I'm going to do this. We need to get out there. Moustakas was just back. Senzel was just back. I think you look at that, some of those new guys added to the nucleus. Castellanos, I mean, that guy's just tearing up, had a big grand slam the other night. Really, what are your thoughts on those new guys out there, Drew, that the Reds have?
Jason, I like guys that show emotion.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Sonny Gray. I listened to his press conference, and, Moose hits that home run, and he's looking into the dugout.
Yeah.
Even Suarez. I like guys, that show emotion and are out there to bat.
Yeah. Well, Cowboy said on this show and also on the air a couple weeks ago, when he was covering let me rephrase that. He said on our show, as well as when he was doing radio for a game, that already in the early season, he could tell that there was a leadership in that clubhouse that was lacking since the days of maybe Scott Rowland. I'm saying Scott Rowland. He didn't say Scott Rowland. But Todd and I talked about that last week, that you got Moustakas in there, you got Castellanos, you got some guys that have got some veteran leadership. They've been there. They've been on those teams that have either won the World Series or played deep into the playoffs. They're the guys that are going to, it was very evident this past week when Moustakas was on the IL and then he came off. That game coming back, coupled with Sonny Gray, was just night and day difference between the game that I saw on Tuesday from the game Wednesday. And just a couple of those puzzle pieces in there can make or break games and really the short season if you think about it.
Well, yeah, I agree. And then Suarez is struggling.
Yeah.
I mentioned this to you earlier. To me, he looks like he's out of shape. I haven't heard anybody say that, but he looks like he's a little bit overweight compared to years past.
Yeah, and of course he's kind of coming off some problems there, but did he have shoulder problems?
Yeah.
So, for all intents and purposes, he probably wouldn't have started the season had it been the 162 back at the end of March, beginning of April. So there's probably a little bit of that to take into consideration. But yeah, he hadn't got his first hit until I think Tuesday night, the game that I got to luckily cover was his first. He was like 0 for 14 at the time. Finally got a double. So if he can turn things around and the starting pitching still goes out and dominates like that, if the bullpen could ever get together, these Reds would be unstoppable. Because, they've got up and down that lineup, they've got guys that you can't sleep on if you're the opposing pitcher, that you can't even take a breath. Look at Tucker Barnhart, which would be, some would consider maybe like the bottom part of the lineup, maybe a guy that's really not going to produce for him, is just kind of in that last spot there in the batting order. Came right off a paternity list and just contributed just right away. So, there's another guy that I think that you can, I don't want to say hang your hat on, but another guy that you got to keep an eye on because he can really be a game changer in these short games in the 60-game season.
Senzel has looked good. He was out, too.
Oh, yeah.
He's come back swinging the bat pretty well. He hit 7th or 8th.
Yeah.
So, their lineup from top to bottom, it's pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. And I really was hoping that they get Shogo in there a lot more. I know there was a couple days there at the beginning of the season that he wasn't, and the whole country of Japan was like, oh my gosh, why aren't you? So, also don't forget today, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but at 12:10 Central, they moved the game up due to weather considerations in Detroit. Bauer versus Fulmer. You can hear it right here on ESPN Radio. Drew, thanks so much for coming in. The show just flew by quickly. It always does with you because, you always bring such intellect to the show.
I know about that.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Love having you on, sir. And we will be back next week with another great Reds guest. And hopefully there's still a season going on. I'm crossing my fingers. Let's hope that there's still a season and we're not talking about possibly restarting the season or maybe the season going away. Right here on the Redlegs Radio Report, ESPN Radio 102.7 and ESPN Radio 1027.com.
This copyrighted broadcast is presented by authority of the Cincinnati Reds and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form.